Are you in your 40s and starting to question everything? Your purpose, your path, your true self? Maybe you're feeling lost, stuck, or like life is passing you by. But what if I told you that this moment, right now, is exactly when your real life is meant to begin? Carl Jung believed that the second half of life is when we stop chasing what the world wants from us and finally begin the journey inward toward who we really are. This video is a powerful invitation to shift your perspective. You'll understand why your 40s might feel confusing or heavy, and how that's actually a sign of spiritual awakening. We'll explore Jung's deep insights on individuation and how concepts like manifestation, visualization, and conscious living become even more potent and necessary as we mature. If you've been asking yourself, is this all there is? This video will give you clarity, purpose, and a renewed sense of direction. If you're ready to stop surviving and start truly living, then this is your moment. Make sure to like the video, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear your story. They told us youth was everything. That it was the summit, the brightest, boldest flame we would ever carry. That within its fire lay beauty, success, desirability, meaning. But they did not tell us that the fire, left untended, could burn us hollow. We were promised the world in our 20s, a life painted in glossy ambition, adorned with validation, adorned with applause. But underneath that sheen, many of us felt an ache, subtle at first, then persistent. A longing we couldn't name. Because while youth moves fast, the soul moves deep, and depth cannot be rushed. There is something haunting in the way youth is worshipped, not for its wisdom, but for its energy. For its unlined skin, not its unshaken truth. But vitality without awareness is like a river with no course. Wild, yes, but often lost. In youth we learn, said the poet. In age we understand. How strange and gentle a truth. Because youth is not the climax, but the prelude. Not the treasure, but the map. It's in our younger years that we collect the tools, the wounds, the dreams. But it is only later, when the noise begins to quiet, when the applause fades, that we start to ask the deeper questions. What now? Who am I beneath the masks? And perhaps, this is where life truly begins. Not in the sprint, but in the slowing. Not in the certainty, but in the wondering. The summit was never youth. It was always awareness. 40 is not merely a number on the calendar. It is a doorway. A quiet, creaking threshold between the life we were taught to build and the life we were born to live. Something ancient stirs here. Not in the outer world, but deep in the interior temple of the soul. At 40, the mind begins to soften, and the heart begins to speak louder. The ego, once so sharp, so armored in youth, starts to loosen its grip. And in that loosening, a whisper emerges, a sacred question not asked by the world, but by the self. Is this all there is? Or is there more? More that cannot be seen, only felt. Carl Jung once said, life really begins at 40. Up until then, you are just doing research. And what profound research it is. We spend our early years gathering, proving, achieving. But what if that was merely the rehearsal, the scaffolding for something more eternal? At 40, we begin to feel the soul knocking louder. We may not understand why, only that the same things no longer satisfy. The roles, the titles, the metrics, they begin to dissolve like sand through open fingers. And beneath them, something deeper waits to be known. This is not a crisis, though the world may call it so. It is a passage, a spiritual invitation cloaked in the ordinary rhythms of midlife. The doorway is simple, but sacred. It doesn't shout. It opens in silence. And beyond it, a new kind of journey. One that doesn't demand we do more, but that we become more. Not for the world, but for our own soul. There is a quiet unraveling that often begins around the age of 40, not visible from the outside, but felt like an earthquake beneath the skin. Careers once built with pride begin to feel like costumes. Relationships once certain now tremble with unspoken questions. The mirror reflects a face we know, and yet no longer fully recognize. This is the death of the false self. Not a death with mourning and tombstones, but a sacred disintegration. The soul, long buried under performance and persona, begins to rise. And with its ascent, the structures of our ego, the need to impress, to control, to be someone in the eyes of others, begin to crack. It may come as a crisis, a failed marriage, a job loss, a health scare. Or it may arrive more subtly, in sleepless nights, a deepening restlessness, or a sudden desire to be alone. But make no mistake, it is a death. And like all true deaths in the spiritual traditions, it precedes a rebirth. Mystics have spoken of this moment for centuries. The dark night of the soul, the ego's surrender, the phoenix's fire. These are not metaphors for despair, they are rituals of awakening. To lose the self you thought you were is not failure. It is initiation. It is the soul saying, "Now let me lead." What dies here is illusion. What emerges is truth. There comes a time in the life of the soul when the search turns inward, when the compass no longer points to mountains to climb or ladders to ascend, but to shadows to reclaim and forgotten rooms of the psyche left unexplored. Carl Jung called this process individuation, the slow, sacred becoming of the whole self. Not the polished self we present to the world, but the true self, composed of contradictions, of light and shadow, of wounds and wonder. It is not about perfection, but integration. Not about becoming someone new, but remembering who we've always been. In our 20s and 30s, we wore masks to survive, the achiever, the lover, the good child, the rebel. But by 40, those masks grow heavy. The soul grows restless under their weight. And so we begin the journey home, not to a place, but to a presence. To the one we were before the world told us who to be. To individuate is to welcome all that we once exiled, the inner child who still aches to play, the shadow who holds our anger and fear, the unlived life humming quietly in the background. It is not an easy pilgrimage, but it is holy. There is a loneliness to this path, not because we are alone, but because few choose to walk it. But those who do often find something astonishing: clarity, courage, and a deep, abiding peace that cannot be shaken by circumstance. We stop asking, "How do I fit in?" and begin asking, "How do I belong to myself?" And that, truly, is the beginning of homecoming. Time, once a distant river flowing beneath us, begins to draw nearer as we approach 40. The river doesn't move faster, but we sense its current more acutely. The ticking clock that once felt like a distant background hum is now a voice that calls us to attention. At 40, death is no longer a concept. It is a presence. Perhaps we have lost someone close to us. Perhaps our body, once unyielding, begins to show the faintest signs of wear. Or perhaps it is simply the realization that time moves forward, whether we are ready or not. We are confronted with mortality, but in this confrontation, we find a strange ally. Death, the great teacher, no longer holds the same terror. Instead, it sharpens our focus. It invites us to live more deliberately, more fully. It tells us that we are not running out of time. We are waking up within time. Marcus Aurelius, the Stoic philosopher, reminded us, "It is not death that a man should fear, but never beginning to live." How fitting, how freeing, to understand that it is not death that takes away our power, but the failure to live fully while we can. At 40, we begin to grasp the weight of each moment, not as a burden, but as a gift, a fleeting thread woven through eternity. And in that awareness, we stop wasting time. We choose presence over distraction. We choose meaning over noise. Mortality does not threaten our peace, it deepens it. For it reminds us of one undeniable truth: life is precious, and to live is to be awake. In the earlier chapters of life, we are taught to do, to achieve, to produce, to become. Our worth is often measured by how much we can accomplish, by how many goals we can check off our list. But as we approach 40, something shifts. The incessant doing begins to feel hollow. The race that once felt so urgent now seems endless, and the finish line, once so desirable, begins to blur in the distance. At this threshold, we begin to ask different questions. Who am I becoming? What am I willing to leave behind? What is the essence of my life? Not in what I do, but in who I am. This is not a rejection of ambition or purpose. It is the realization that the true power of life lies not in our external achievements, but in the depth with which we meet the moment. At 40, the soul yearns for being, not doing. It craves stillness, presence, and meaning in the smallest of things. There is a profound shift from how much can I do, to how deeply can I live, from striving to arriving in the present. It is a surrender, but not of weakness, a surrender of trust. Trust that by letting go of control, we will find our way not through effort, but through grace. In the quiet of this surrender, we discover the beauty of simplicity. We learn to savor moments rather than consume them. We learn that there is wisdom in stillness, that there is power in silence, and that the soul flourishes when it is given the space to simply be. As the poet Rainer Maria Rilke beautifully wrote, "The purpose of life is to be defeated by greater and greater things." At 40, the greatest defeat is the letting go of the need to be someone and embracing the fullness of simply being. In the journey toward maturity, the soul becomes a sanctuary for both the sacred feminine and sacred masculine energies. At 40, the masks of youth begin to fall away, and we reconnect with the deepest aspects of ourselves, not as societal constructs, but as essential forces that exist within us all. The sacred feminine is the wisdom of intuition, the embrace of receptivity, the quiet yet unwavering power of being. It is the energy of compassion, of nurturing, of connection with the cycles of life. At 40, this feminine energy often begins to awaken in both men and women. It is the time when we no longer feel compelled to push, to prove, to dominate. Instead, we learn the art of listening, to our hearts, to others, to the whispers of the earth beneath our feet. Similarly, the sacred masculine, with its archetype of protection, purpose, and structure, also finds a deeper expression. It is not the drive to control, but the quiet strength that arises from purpose aligned with the soul. The masculine, as it matures, no longer seeks validation or recognition. It seeks integrity, the courage to act with wisdom, and the strength to uphold what is sacred in the world. This integration of the sacred feminine and masculine is not an intellectual process, but a profound inner healing. It is the recognition that the wounded parts of ourselves, the abandoned tenderness or the repressed strength, can now be brought into balance. Through this reconciliation, we step into a new wholeness. The dance of these energies within us, once fractured, now becomes an elegant movement of harmony. This process allows us to approach life with a sense of purpose that transcends ego, grounded in the understanding that to be whole is not to be one-sided, but to honor both the strength and softness within. We are not fragments. We are the divine coming into form. The child we once were still lives within us. Though time has weathered our bodies and altered our perspectives, the essence of that child, their wonder, their creativity, their joy, never truly disappears. At 40, many of us find ourselves drawn back to those fragments of our early selves, yearning to reconnect with the innocence and spontaneity that once defined us. It is not a return to childishness, but to the core of what it means to be, to embrace the curiosity, the playfulness, the freedom to simply exist without the weight of expectations. It is the moment when the stern adult within us softens, and we remember the child's delight in the simple act of being alive. As we reconnect with this inner child, we heal not by growing more serious or more responsible, but by remembering joy. As we step into the second half of life, we are invited to view aging not as a decline, but as a deepening. The years ahead are not to be feared or resisted. They are a sacred apprenticeship, a journey into the soul's truest expression. At 40, we find ourselves on the precipice of a profound spiritual invitation, to go deeper, not to faster, to live not by the demands of society, but by the call of our own soul. In many spiritual traditions, the elder is revered, not as a person in decline, but as a guide, a teacher, a keeper of wisdom. The second half of life, far from being a race to hold on to what we once had, is a gentle unfolding of wisdom and insight. It is a shift from the external to the internal, from the chase for achievements to the pursuit of meaning. In our youth, we are often caught up in the illusion of urgency. We rush through life, driven by ambition, by what we are told we should be. But at 40, we begin to understand that life does not demand more of us. It simply asks us to be more of who we are. This is not about getting ahead, but about moving in alignment with the truest essence of the self. The second half of life is an invitation to move inward, to rediscover the wellspring of truth that resides within. It is not about running out of time, but rather about waking up to the time we have. We are finally ready to live with intention, to reflect, to dive deeper into the mysteries of existence, to embrace the full depth of the human experience. Let us no longer fear the passing years. Instead, let us embrace them as the opportunity to craft a life filled with depth, meaning, and sacred presence. As we near the end of this reflection, I invite you to pause and ask yourself, what is life asking of you now? What parts of yourself have you left behind, forgotten, or perhaps been too afraid to face? At 40, the question of what comes next is not one of worldly achievements, but one of inner truth. It is not a question of what you have to do, but who you are becoming in the quiet moments between your actions. Perhaps you feel that your true self has been buried under years of doing, performing, achieving. Or maybe you have begun to touch the edges of a deeper awareness, a longing to return to the essence of who you are. Whatever your experience, know this: the journey is sacred, and it is yours alone. Now, take a moment to sit in silence or to journal, allowing the soul to speak. In this space, listen to the whispers that are often drowned out by the noise of the world. Let your heart guide you towards the parts of yourself that are ready to emerge. Let the questions that have arisen in you today linger in your mind, and trust that they will lead you to a deeper understanding of your life's purpose. Remember, the true journey begins not when the world sees us, but when we begin to truly see ourselves. This is the invitation that life offers us at 40, to no longer seek ourselves outside, but to turn inward, to embrace the soul's quiet awakening. And in this embrace, we find our way home. If you found value in this reflection, I invite you to like, share, and subscribe to this channel. We are on a collective journey, and there's so much more to explore together. Your presence here means that you are already answering the call to deeper self-awareness, and I would love for you to continue walking this path with us. Hit the bell icon to ensure you don't miss any future content that can guide you on your journey. Thank you for being here, and until next time.